Amanda Oldakowski. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Amanda, it's great to have you here and to talk about leadership in technology, being an engineering manager, what it means, what it entails, the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? Um, and you have a lot of experience, right? But I would like to ask you first to get started and for the audience to get to know you, what do you do today for a living?
Certainly. I've pivoted a little bit, so I'm currently working as a technical program manager. I'm working currently as a consultant for a cryptocurrency company.
Very good. And what does that role entail? What are your day-to-day activities? What teams are you interacting with?
Yeah, so I take more of a high level management instead of working directly with individual teams at this point. Basically, I'm kind of the liaison between the founders of the company and several different product managers and several different teams. I work with engineers, helping them to unblock when they have to reach out to our CTO, work with our CTO to prioritize setting up OKR standards. My favorite name that I've been called so far is my chaos coordinator. Somebody actually got me a little placard, so I thought that was really cute. Basically, I help keep it all the glue together.
That should be on LinkedIn. Chaos coordinator. I keep all the glue together. I absolutely love it. Let's go back in time. How and why did you get into technology? And did you always know you will get into engineering?
Oh, absolutely not. Uh, I think when I was a kid, I had the fantastical dreams that all the parents want their kids to have. You're going to go be a doctor or a lawyer or something. And for me, it was doctor, and got into college and hated biology. So, that would cause a bit of a problem. But pivoted from there, still went into a lot of the sciences, a lot of the mathematics courses, always kind of dabbled in computers and coding just because it was a fun hobby. And didn't really think of it as much of a career because there's that stigma that if you're working in computers, you're sitting in a cubicle behind a desk for 8 hours or hanging out in a basement, and that just didn't seem appealing. And so went more into the theoretical and mathematics and really enjoyed that. And somebody in the technology department said, "Hey, do you want to give this a shot?" And I was like, "You know what? Let's try it. See what it is." And it's absolutely not the sit in a dark, dreary basement by yourself, right? And got to meet a lot of great people. Really jumped into kind of seeing how the coding aspect work, how the coding work together. It's really easy to learn one language but not understand how it fits with a bunch of other languages. Especially that front end back end component is a lot of fun. And then where I really found my niche was the fact that I can really communicate well between the tech folks and the non-tech folks. And so that's really where I started pivoting into the engineering manager, technical program manager role.
It, I love what you said about communicating and orchestrating between the technical folks and the non-technical folks. How will you describe the way that you talk to each other? And I guess it's kind of different, right? When you talk to one or the other, and then you translate between the two, right? But that what do you have in mind when you're talking with non-tech people, and what do you have in mind when you're talking to tech people?
Yeah. So, I mean, when you're talking to tech people, it's very much to the point, right? They're very busy. They want to go back to their coding. I'm talking about what kind of architecture we've got set up, what kind of vulnerabilities we've got for security, SDKs and APIs we need to work on, tech debt that's happening because of the way we're developing our code, any big blockers or things that I need to get clarifications on descriptions for tickets for is usually what's happening with my tech department. And then when I go talk to my non-tech department, I say, "Hey, the tech guys need to know more about this thing. Tell me what you're envisioning." Or I'll talk about, "Hey, this is the feature we're developing. We've got this pretty thing that's coming out," because the non-tech people like to see the face of it. And you've got to bring that back-end component that isn't the face, but it's the bones and the structure, and make it look like something that the non-tech people understand and why it's working. So I love to use the comparison of a house because everybody wants to know what color you're painting the walls, but they forget that you got to build the structure of the room. So, you really want that bedroom and it's going to be a really cool blue color. But today we built in that soundproofing. So if you're doing random stuff in the bedroom, or your kids are doing stuff in the bedroom, you can go to sleep at night without having to hear a bunch of screaming and random others. And that's usually the big difference is you've got to find something to relate to each person.
I like it. And how do you go about managing expectations, especially for the non-tech people, right? I'm a non-tech person. I'm an attorney, but I work as the CEO of a tech company, and I have my fair share of being both a customer and a vendor on the technology side, right? And still, up to this date, managing expectations in terms of scope and timing is super hard when you're talking to non-tech people. And there's always this doubt of, is this coming along as expected in time, in scope? Am I being, told the truth about why we're getting delayed or not? Did they tell me something and now we are kind of there or not there? How do you manage all of that?
Certainly. Definitely, as you said, it's a thing that happens in every single project. There's always that frustration on the customer side that they don't quite understand, because in reality they really don't, right? They're trusting that what you're telling them is the truth, and then when something doesn't go according to plan, they get confused because you were that liaison, and now they're frustrated. Really, it's setting up that communication chain early. I like to liken it to when you're communicating with someone for the first time, you never want it to be a bad experience. So you get to know them, you get to know what their wants are. I always call it the trifecta. You're looking at scope, timeline, and budget. One of those is usually going to be more important than the other two. And getting to know your customer is going to really help you focus on that. I also work with my tech team and I build in a bit of a buffer because I know that as we're building a product, you're going to have tech debt build up, and that tech debt is going to come back to bite you at some point. So you've got to build in time for it. And that's going to help you keep on schedule as well. If we can get, if we've got a velocity of say 30 for sprint, I'm going to build in maybe 25 tickets, maybe 25 story points instead of that 30. That way we've got that little bit of buffer so that in the middle of a sprint, when my developers come up and say, hey, in order for us to finish this feature, we've got to address this tech debt. Now we can just throw it in without having to go back to the customer and say, hey, we've got some tech debt. We had to build in this extra feature so that something wouldn't fall down. And customers like to be kept happy. So I would rather under promise and over deliver versus the other way around. But if there is an issue, I'm very quick to tell the customer if it's something that might affect timeline or budget.
How do you work with the sales department? Because you said something very important: under promise and over deliver, right? Many times I wear the sales hat, right? And in sales, you're always tempted to over promise, right? You're trying to win the deal, right? So is that something that happens to you? How do you manage that, and how do you educate your sales team so that they don't put you in trouble afterwards?
It's definitely an interesting aspect. And I would say it's a bit of a dance. So for me, I would say we try to give them estimates of general things. What we've had from the past, right? If you're developing and we know that pretty well. If it's a new feature, we try to get a little bit more of a buffer. Of course, that's going to be some back and forth with the sales team, right? They might not agree with us, and we may have to pick up additional resources, maybe add another developer half time to help make up that timeline. And it could also be very much like we try to keep things in perspective. So when we're meeting with a client, especially we don't have everything scoped out. It's part of the agile method. We're working on it as we go through features. We might discover something that the client thought was much deeper than what we had expected in the sales. And I try to be a part of those calls with the client because the product manager, the product owner can often be quick to say, oh yeah, we can do that. And I'm usually that person like holding in the reins, like, yeah, that sounds like a really great idea. Let me bring it back to our team, figure out what kind of, timeline and budget we're looking for this really cool feature. Because I want to make sure that we're still staying where you want to be. And if you've got a hard deadline, I love this cool feature, but we got to make sure that feature, is that feature something that's going to be essential for this deadline, or is it something that maybe we'll release in a post feature? And then we might get into that conversation of like how important it is. And if it's a showstopper, I got to work with the product owner to then jump in and maybe cut something else. And really the sales team kind of promises the moon, right? And so we're there to help get that moon looking like a moon without it falling out of the sky. So it can definitely be a bit of a battle working with the sales team, but we do try our hardest to kind of help set realistic expectations. And if we can get a developing team looking at those features that they want right away, we try to do that sooner rather than later so that we get proper estimates.
I like it. So will you say that coming back to building trust with the customer, whomever is going to be, getting that software, using that software, you talked about communicating early, setting up that challenge, that channel early, understanding on that trifecta of scope, timeline, and budget, which is the most important. Delivering, right? Over delivering as much as possible so that you can continue building trust, and then raising your hand if anything is going off rails, just telling that to the client as soon as possible. Anything else you will add in sense of how do you build trust with customers?
Yeah, I would say figure out what communication style your customer likes. For some people, they want a daily Slack notification if they're on a Slack channel. For some people, they want to be really hands off and they want a once a month update. And you could get anything, in between there, depending on what kind of client you're working with. Especially if you've done what I've done in the past working for a consulting firm. You're going to get all kinds of folks. And making sure you're setting up that communication plan early is really key. So I've come into projects where the client is upset, they're talking about walking, from the deal. And the first thing I do when I join a team is I want to meet one-on-one with that client. I want to know what's important to them. I want to know why they're frustrated. I want to know where they think they are versus where they want to be. And then it's my job to bridge that gap. And then I'm going to bring the important information back to my development team because they don't need to sit there in the hours of meetings that I'm having with my client. They want the quick 10-minute snippet of what do we need to do to make this a good product that our customers can be happy with.
Very good. What does it take to become or to be a good chaos coordinator, a good engineering manager?
I think it's a dance. It really is. It's a dance. So you've got to be able to jump in and manage when necessary, right? If we're running behind on deadlines, if there's something really important that the client needs us to focus on, that's where I'm going to need to jump in and dictate a little bit. But at the same time, I'm also a coach, right? This is my team. If I hired this team for a reason. I trust this team to do their jobs. I trust that they know what they're doing. So when they're communicating with me that they need to focus on this feature and this is happening and we've got some of this tech debt behind, it's my job to manage that with the product owner to make sure that everyone is on the same page and moving forward. So I've always kind of hated this analogy because of how it is, but I had a mentor tell me this: you want to give them enough rope to hang themselves with. So give them that leeway to really go on and be able to do great things, but also make great mistakes. Because as someone's learning, they're going to make mistakes, but you can't hang them for it. You got to be able to show them how to grow and be able to move past that mistake and be able to continue down the path that they're continuing. And people don't want to be dictated to, right? The greatest way you're learning is through trial and error. So you've got to give them enough room to make some of those errors, but not so much room that the error is going to be catastrophic.
Very good. And who is, can you talk about that mentor and when that person had an influence on your career?
Yeah. Uh, so I've had various mentors throughout the time. I used to be a tutor back in college, and I always kind of worked on mathematics because I really enjoyed it. And one of the things that is easy, right, is just to tell somebody how to do something. And one of my mathematics professors found out about it and really just kind of gave me that like metaphorical slap to the head, like, what are you doing? You're being an idiot. This is lazy. Why are you doing it this way? And I never really had thought of it that way. You know, it's easy to just tell somebody how to do something and they're thankful and everyone moves on. It's a lot harder to try and teach someone how to learn it for themselves. And it takes a lot more work, but the reward is so much more justifying, right? They're coming to you once or twice instead of every 5 minutes. And then what's even better is they're bringing things to you that you didn't learn. So now you get to learn on the back end as well. I really got to explore that in coding as well. I worked with a mentor who let me drown a little bit, which I wasn't used to. I was used to people telling me how to do things. And so, you know, you have that panic moment of, oh God, I don't know how to do this. This is due tomorrow. What am I going to do? But you learn to work through it and you scramble through it, and it's not going to be pretty. You know, if you're really lucky, it's pretty the first go, but it's usually not. And so I tell folks that I'm worried about it being functional. We can focus on the pretty later. If you can figure out how to do it on your own, we can always refine it before it gets to a customer. But the important thing is now that you've learned how to do it on your own, you'll never forget it. So the next time it comes around, you can teach somebody else how to do it.
That's a very important lesson, and it's a very hard change. I see that a lot in people that go into leadership, and letting go is the most scary thing in the world, because the results are still on you, are still a reflection of what you are doing with your team. So what you said about giving enough rope, about letting people drown, but sort of in a controlled environment so that they can learn and grow by trying things, by getting them right, but having mistakes, controllable mistakes, but still learning from them. I think that's a beautiful way of looking at how to lead teams. What is it that you like the most about leading teams? When you think about it, when you know, Sunday, you think about the week, what drives you?
I like to see if people grow. It's always been a bit of a controversial term to call it a servant leader, but I don't feel like I'm successful unless everyone on my team feels like they're successful. And I'll take credit where credit is due, but I often will divert to my team, like, especially when you're in front of a client. It's easy for the client to see my face and go, oh yeah, you did a great job. And I was like, yeah, man, my back ender stayed that extra hour, cranked it through. I worked with him or her, and it was just phenomenal. Like, I can't believe the great job they are. I really appreciate your thanks. I'm going to pass it on to them. And it also gets the customer reminding about like what's happening back there. Like, it's not just me. I got a whole team of folks like helping me out. I'm just the one telling you the data and kind of coaching and mentoring. But that's really what gets me out of bed every day. Like, when I get to think about like, hey, my team is struggling today. So like, I got to make sure that I'm setting up that meeting with my client, working with the product owner, getting these couple of things together, because we want to make sure that when we're delivering a product, it's what the client wants. Or, I'm really excited. My team, because, I've worked with folks all over the world and they work in different time zones than I do. So I wake up and they've got a whole bunch of stuff ready to go for me already. And it's a fun back and forth. And I love that every day is something new, right? it can sound like you're doing the same monotonous thing every day, and you're really not. Every day is a brand new challenge. Some of them are more chaotic than others, right? You know, when an app goes down, everybody's all hands down and freaking out and making sure they're getting it together. Some are like fantastic, phenomenal wins. Like, we figured out how to get this subscription working on several different tiers for several different devices through Apple and Google, and it was this new developer who found this really cool, site, and everyone was able to expand on it, and the team just came together. And I love it when the team comes together and they don't need me, right? I want to be there to like monitor progress, but I'm not there to dictate. So it's really cool to just kind of be there to observe and help give feedback when asked.
What does a high-performing software development team look like? If you go back in memory lane and think about some of the best teams that you had, what were their characteristics?
I would say they communicate with each other. They communicate, they work together. I've been in stand-ups where I'm just observing and they're chatting back and forth with like what each person is doing and what each person needs from the other person. And maybe that other person will chat in like, hey, I'm really bogged down on this. I'm not going to be able to get to this for like 3 more days. And that's a click to me that like I need to jump in and figure out with the product order if there's a way to prioritize. But it's really great when they can take on that task and go, oh, if you need this right now, I can pause what I'm doing because it's not really needed because my product owner told me it wasn't higher priority. So let me get this thing out to you right now. And then I'm just watching. Right? I'm watching the whole situation as it's unfolding. I'm checking my burn down charts to make sure that they're staying on task. But otherwise, they've got it. They'll jump in and they'll ask me when something's there, and I try really hard to get that back as soon as I can so that they're not blocked. But a very well software developing team for me, they're like a well-oiled machine, right? They know how to talk to each other. They know who to reach out to. I think the worst thing that can kill a team is killing the lines of communication. I've been on teams before where the developers aren't supposed to talk to QA, which in my brain is a little asinine, right? Like, you want QA constantly talking to your development team. You want them constantly talking to design. You want to make sure that everybody knows what we're delivering at the end of the day. And so really a good self-functioning communication network is like key, right? You could have new developers, you could have experienced developers, but if they're not communicating with each other, the whole team's going to fail. And that's the important thing at the end of the day. I'm not going to blame one person or the other. I'm going to blame the whole team. What did we fail at as a team, and how can we move forward?
And do you think different types of people enable better communication? And if so, how do you choose those people, and how do you build teams? If sometimes I imagine you just get a team and, Amanda, this is your team, right? And you have to work with them. But some other times maybe you get to pick, and some other times you are interviewing, right? How do you go about that? What are you looking for when you are interviewing people and building a team?
Certainly. For me, I wouldn't say one type of person over the other for communication, because some folks will communicate very well in a meeting like we are now. Some folks prefer asynchronous communication. So they might prefer a Slack message or an email or a group chat. But what I'm looking for is someone who can respond in a reasonable amount of time. So if I'm sending you a message, I'm expecting a response within 24 to 48 hours. I'm also going to mark it that it needs a response. So I'm going to be very clear that this isn't just an FYI thing. I need you to answer me. And I'm looking for somebody who understands that they can't work in a silo, right? If you are having difficulties communicating with me during an interview, it could be, maybe it's face-to-face. So maybe face-to-face communication isn't your Slack. But if you're having a difficult time communicating, say, on a coding interview, whether that's walking me through what you're doing to code or commenting in your code if you're having a hard time discussing it verbally, I'm going to take a little bit of a pause because I'm concerned that you might not be able to communicate in general with a team, because I'm giving you several different ways to do that. And I'm also going to let folks know in advance, because differently abled people communicate differently. And for some folks, myself included, it can cause a lot of anxiety not knowing what's coming up. So I'm going to prepare you. Like, we're going to go through a coding interview. I'm going to ask you to either explain to me verbally or written what you're doing as you're doing it. And I want you to be prepared for that. I'm not going to tell you what coding question I'm going to ask you, but I am going to be preparing you to let you know that I'm going to be asking you to explain what you're doing to me in one way, shape, or form. And I would say that that's a pretty good indication. The second piece I'm looking for is, what do you do in your free time? I'm looking for people that are self-starters. I want people that know how to learn on their own. I'm a huge nerd when it comes to that. Like, I'm constantly looking at the next certification I need to get. If my developer's doing some kind of really cool architecture I don't know about, I'm gonna go try and find a class to kind of, just get the overview of it. I'm never gonna be like as deep as this architect who's been doing it for 15 or 20 years, but I want to be able to know enough to talk to them and understand what they're talking about. Same thing goes for anyone on my development team. If you are a QA person and you're not looking at the newest tools, especially with all the AI out there to help you automate some of that, that's a red flag for me. I don't want to have to tell you to go learn something, but you want to constantly be bettering yourself. You want to be helpful for your team. And if you're not taking that initiative, that self-drive to learn on your own, I don't know if you would fit with my team.
I like it very much. Very, very important. What do you think about the distribution and the diversity in technology, specifically as it relates to women, right? Do you think there are enough women in tech?
Not even a little bit. It's still very much an uphill battle. I think that we're starting to kind of make more of a headway into this new position of like the technical project manager, the technical program manager, but when it comes to like the down and dirty of like architects and cloud managers and developers, even on the QA side, when we're in the engineering team, it can be really challenging to be a female. Not only for cultural reasons. So, for example, in one country, it was very much a stigma that if a woman got married or pregnant, that they wouldn't continue working. It was just assumed that they wouldn't be working after they got married or after they had the child, and so the company would automatically terminate their contract, just assuming that that was what was going to happen. I've had female coders who wanted to go from being, say, front stack to full stack, and there's a lot of pushback because they think that women are going to leave for the same aforementioned reasons. If you're getting married, you might have a kid someday. We don't want to invest in you. There's still very much that stigma, and it's happening in multiple countries, which can be frustrating. There's still very much I like to call it the boys club, right? I mean, I've joined teams where I was the first and only female on the team, and it's definitely an uphill battle. You have to fight to prove that you know what you're doing and you know what you're talking about. And I can understand for a lot of women that can be very exhausting.
And do you think there is awareness about this situation?
I think there's an awareness. I don't think it's enough to really make serious actionable items on it. I mean, I've seen coding boot camps offer special scholarships for women, but they're very basic coding boot camps. And then once you've done a boot camp, you've really got to immerse yourself in it. And I've seen women go into hackathons because they're having difficulties finding jobs that are going to pay anything equal to what a male would make. I've also seen, especially in an engineering department, if there aren't females in the department, I'm going to think twice about it, because do I want to fight that fight again with another company and try to prove again that not only do I know how to do my job, but I can hire other females that know how to do their job? And that can be a very frustrating uphill battle. So I think that the awareness is starting to be there. I don't think that we're making enough action on it.
How can we make it better? How can we increase awareness and drive change?
I would say it has to start young. Um, even people with mathematics, look at your team. I think I lost you for a second there. Oh, hang on. Now I can't hear you.
Sorry,
No.
I was on mute. I lost you for a second. No worries, we will get this part edited. So let me ask the question again. I will ask it in 1, 2, 3. So Amanda, how do you think we can increase awareness and how can we make this better?
I would say it starts at all levels. Right. We want to start educating folks even as early as grade school, getting more women to take on those challenging roles. I've seen a lot of school experiences where males are encouraged to take more challenging roles, women are encouraged to be perfectionists, which can serve them very well when they're younger, but it can also cause a lot of issues with not taking that challenge. For a more immediate effect, I would ask everyone, look at your teams. Are your teams diversified? Are they all white males? Do you have people of color on your team? Are there females? Is there a wide variety of age ranges? Is there a wide variety of experience levels? If not, maybe think about, are you playing it safe and playing in your comfort zone? And do you need to branch out and be part of that change?
It's good advice, very good advice. Let me change topics a little bit and talk about trends and new technologies. Whenever I ask this question, I always feel like I'm leading the witness because, you know, the AI is the big elephant in the room and everything, but what new technology excites you and you look at it like, wow, this, you know, I'm excited to be living this right now.
I mean, automation is always a huge, factor close to my heart, and AI happens to be that new factor right now. I think folks are either really excited about it or really scared of it. I don't think it's going away. AI is here to stay. Just how fast it's growing is a testament to showing that it's going to stay. It reminds me of right when you go grocery shopping, you used to have cashiers at every aisle, and now we've got self-checkouts. You're going to see AI take on a very similar role in the computer world, and you're either going to learn it and be part of that trend, or it's going to blow by you. And so I use AI fairly regularly, right? Like, we could have a very long meeting with several participants and using AI to help summarize those meetings. It might have grabbed something you missed. It's going to help set a summary. It's going to make my job so much faster to set out summaries to an executive versus my developer team versus my product team versus my design team, because each of those have to be designed a little bit differently. But if I can use AI, I can do it in 5 minutes instead of spending maybe 30 minutes tailoring each one so that they've got the appropriate data in them. AI is really great for basic coding. It's great to help you do some small debugging. Now, it's not going to do all of the coding for you. And I think that's where folks get that misconstrued conception that, well, we don't need to hire junior developers because we have, we've got AI. ChatGPT can do basic coding for us. But you still need that brain back there to go, oh, well, we need to go in this direction and we've got to consider this vulnerability and how is it going to interact with this piece of code? And that's where you really need the human body. But I would say AI is a tool, right? I mean, think about it. 20 years ago, teachers used to make fun of us and saying, you've got to know all your multiplication tables because you'll never have a calculator with you. And now, we carry them in our pockets all the time on our phones. AI is going to do something very similarly.
That's a funny anecdote. If only they knew, right, what was coming and how things would change. And I, I, I always think about, people working in education, and you had your time working doing tutoring and all of that, right? I mean, it's hard. Things are changing so much that you have to put so much emphasis on learning how to learn, analytical thinking, right? Because things are, by the time our kids go out of school, things are already going, to have changed so much that it will be different from what they, when they were in first grade or whatever. It's an exciting time to be alive. How do you see the future of your profession, specifically the engineering manager? Do you see changes? Do you see a continued focus or even more focus on the coordination of the chaos, the communication between all of the different stakeholders? When you think about what you do and the future of what you do, how do you think that's going to change?
I think it's going to be a pretty drastic change. I think a lot of folks who are in engineering managing and program managing, they get comfortable. And I'm not against getting comfortable with your job, right? You worked really hard, you get that nice little lull and you're kind of humming along. But at the same time, on the other hand, I've read articles saying that our jobs are going to be non-existent in 30 years because AI is going to take care of it. And I think if you were not evolving to work with the AI, yeah, my job might become my job as I know it now will be non-existent. And if I'm not continually working with that technology as it's evolving, I'm going to get left behind. And I could see where a lot of maybe smaller teams might be able to just, work with a lot of that folks. And it's definitely going to be quite an adjustment. I think the piece that people forget is that a really good engineering manager, technical program manager, they're going to be able to have those communication pieces. I mean, we've all kind of seen how, for example, ChatGPT, right, is the big one right now, and how it can spit out a thank you letter or a cover letter or a summary, and it's a little strange, right? You've got to have somebody to tweak it and make it feel a little bit more human. But I can see as it continues to evolve and learn, it's going to get better and better and better at that. And the reminder is that there's still somebody pushing those buttons to get that response, right? And if you're the person who is going to continually learn to make sure you're adjusting with that, you'll be one of the people who ends up going. But I'm going to bring it back to the cashier again, right? There used to be 12 to 15 cashiers at a grocery store, and now there's 1 or 2. So are you going to be part of those 14 or 15 cashiers that get left behind because you were comfortable in the engineering department? Or are you going to be that 1 or 2 that stayed because you learned the technology, you adapted with it, you're constantly evolving your job?
I think the key to what you said as well is kind of a leap of faith in that it's impossible to know how exactly our role will be or what are we going to be doing, because technology is changing and it's uncertain, right? But you gotta trust that if you stay up to date, you will find your place, even if you don't know what it is, and even if it feels so risky and insecure and like, oh, my floor is shaking. Just have that faith and that trust in that, learn, adapt, and you will be okay.
Yeah. The more valuable you are to your teams and your departments, the more likely you are to stay, right? If you, maybe my job will have a completely different job description in 10 years. I might be doing something I never even thought I'd be doing. But the willingness to learn and jump in where needed is huge.
Very good. Amanda, one last question to you. What do you do when you are not working?
Well, I've already talked about my nerdiness of learning. I have more nerdiness on the side. So, a game I play Dungeons and Dragons, so I help with campaigning there. I'm sure that's near and dear to a lot of folks' hearts. Really started jumping into that, so that's been a lot of fun. But I like to tinker, just in general. So, not only learning like in a mental state, but physically. So currently, I'm working on building a hydro garden in my basement. I eventually want to have the goal of being self-sustainable when it comes to growing and eating my own food.
Wow.
I tinker with the house, so we're currently building holiday decorations because we have a bunch of little kids in the neighborhood, and I thought it would be really cute. I learned woodworking. Currently learned, I just finished a class to learn how to do some welding, and yeah, I tinker. I tinker all over the place. So if it's a new skill I can learn, that's kind of what gets me going. And I don't generally stick with any one task for a long period of time, which can have its downsides of like half finished projects. I'll be honest, I have several of those going too. But really, the sustainability piece really hits me. So like, I'm learning about solar power, wind power. I'm learning about how to be more sustainable in my own life. If I can grow my own vegetables, we're not worrying about having petrol drive them across the country for me to purchase them. It's a very big and very important piece of my life. Nothing exciting as like playing the drums, but I do quite enjoy.
You stay super busy. I like what you're saying, and I'm sure my wallet will like it as well, right? Self-sustaining, I mean, you can go very far. I don't have. At home, you know, as far as I go is switching a light bulb. More than that, and I'm useless. It's amazing. I'm completely useless, right? And so many times I would like to have more abilities and to be able to do stuff myself. But I love it. I will touch base with you, learn more about how you're growing stuff and how you're doing that. My little kids take too much attention from me to be good with growing vegetables right now, but it's something that I would love to do. I always dreamt about I like cooking and I would love to have the ingredients at home, and see the whole from, growing them to cooking and then eating that stuff. So, Amanda, it's been a pleasure. I appreciate you. I learned a lot. The chaos coordinator, I think it's a beautiful way of describing what you do, but you also have a beautiful way of communicating, making the complex simple, and putting all of the pieces together. Thank you for being here, and I hope we can do this sometime again.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time. Hope you have a great one.